In a new interview with a state-controlled Russian newspaper, President Vladimir Putin says the private mercenary Wagner Group simply does not exist. That's a quote. Putin was referring to the legality of the Wagner Group as he described a meeting with its senior fighters and Wagner boss Yevgeny Prigozhin, who the public hasn't seen since he led a revolt against Russia's defense leadership. The Kremlin says that meeting happened just 5 days after Prigozhin led that failed rebellion against the military. The article further details how Putin is working to put a wedge between Prigozhin and his thousands of fighters. CNN's Alex Marquardt joins us now live. Alex, you are there in Dnipro, Ukraine, but what are you learning about this really interesting development that we're hearing now from Putin in that state-controlled media article?
Yeah, it really is very interesting, Sarah. It appears that Putin is making 2 points here. One, that legally there are no mercenary groups allowed in Russia, and the other, that Wagner is no longer operating in Ukraine, and that is something that we also heard from the Pentagon last night. Now, what form Wagner takes beyond Ukraine, that is still very much a question. They have operations in Africa and in the Middle East, and of course the fate of their leader, Yevgeny Prigozhin, that is very much in the balance. Here's a little bit more of what Putin told that Kommersant newspaper. I want to quote: "We do not have a law for private military organizations," he said. "It simply does not exist. There is no such legal entity." He admits, Sarah, that it is not an easy question. And then he gave some really interesting details about that extraordinary meeting just 5 days after the Wagner mutiny. He said he met with 35 commanders from Wagner at the Kremlin. Yevgeny Prigozhin was there, and he said to the commanders, "You can join the Russian military and keep fighting under your current commander, whose call sign is Sadoy, which means gray hair, and continue to stay in this fight." And he says that the men there, the commanders, nodded in agreement, but then Yevgeny Prigozhin piped up and said, "No, the guys do not agree with this decision." So Prigozhin at odds there with Putin. We don't know from this article how this ended, but Sarah, it does appear that Putin is trying to divide and weaken Prigozhin while also maintaining the Wagner fighters, who are a significant fighting force, Sarah.
It's all very, very interesting to see where those thousands of paid fighters go. Alex, you broke the news yesterday that these controversial U.S.-supplied cluster munitions are now in Ukraine. You spoke to a general who said that is exactly what happened. What more do you know along those lines? Are they being used yet?
Well, let me just answer your last question, Sarah. According to the Pentagon, those Wagner fighters are still in Russian-occupied Ukraine. As for the cluster munitions, that you're right, that general told me they have not yet been used. The Pentagon did confirm our reporting from this general yesterday that these U.S. highly controversial cluster munitions are indeed in Ukraine, ready to be used. The Pentagon also said that there is a third country that had already provided cluster munitions. We understand that country is Turkey. And we have to note that Ukraine and Russia have both previously used cluster munitions during this conflict. Now, how did these American cluster munitions get to Ukraine so quickly? We're told that they had been already pre-positioned in Europe. Now the question is, when will they first be used? And a U.S. official told me that they have decided that the Russians will be the first to know. Sarah?
Okay. Alex Marquardt, thank you for all your reporting on this, Kate.
Thanks so much. Let's get to this and much more. Joining us right now is the coordinator for strategic communications at the National Security Council at the White House, John Kirby. I do want to start. I want to get to Ukraine in just a second, but it all is wrapped up, John, in an important thing that happened overnight. Republicans passing several controversial amendments to the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA, this massive defense bill's fate now in question. What is the message from the Commander-in-Chief, John, after what happened overnight in the House of Representatives?
Well, I mean, he obviously looks forward to one day having the NDA on his desk so that he can sign a defense bill and get our troops and our military well-funded and well-resourced for the kinds of missions that they're taking on all around the world. And, you know, we'll wait and see what that legislation ends up looking like when it gets to his desk. So, I mean, obviously we've seen what some of the House Republicans have tried to do to it. The president firmly believes that the National Defense Authorization Act really should be focused on making sure our troops have the training and the tools, the capabilities that they need to defend this country all around the world, and that's where he wants the focus to be. He absolutely, I'm not going to get into debating each of these amendments, but I do want to make this point. He absolutely believes that diversity and inclusion and equity in the United States military is important. We are a diverse force because we represent and defend all of the United States, all Americans. He absolutely believes that female service members and female family members of service members should be able to get the reproductive care that they need. And if they're stationed in a state where it's not available because of state law, then he fully supports the Pentagon's policy of providing leave and travel allowances for those folks to go get the reproductive care that they need. 1 in 5 of our service members are women, and it's important that we listen to their needs and take care of them appropriately.
Well, right now, those provisions, those were passed. Those were two or three of the amendments that were passed overnight, and would be on the final version of this bill that the House is going to need to vote on at some point. Does the president want Democrats to vote against the NDAA as you see it today in the House?
Again, I'm not going to speak for the voting inclinations here, and I won't get ahead of the legislative process.
I totally understand that, but the president would ultimately, obviously, he needs to sign this into law. If the bill, as we saw with the amendments coming out of the House overnight, would be the version to come to his desk, would he veto it?
It's a hypothetical, Kate. I'm not going to engage at this point in the legislative process. There's a long way to go before this legislation gets to his desk. What I can assure you is that the president wants the military well-funded, and he wants our troops taken care of.
Do you see the president signing a National Defense Authorization Act that limits transgender rights, that rips out diversity training, and does exactly the opposite of what you said the president supports when it comes to access to reproductive rights?
It's very difficult to see the president supporting legislation that would make it harder for Americans to serve in uniform and to not be able to do so with dignity, would not be able to do so with the proper care that they need, both medical and mental care. It's very difficult to see that the president would ever sign legislation that would put our troops at greater risk or put our readiness at risk.
Does this put the administration in a tough position, though, if this is what is you're looking at and Democrats are looking at in the House right now, of having to explain why Democrats would vote against pay raises for the military and future investments in military infrastructure, which is a big part of what the NDAA is?
The president's comfortable and confident that he's not going to sign legislation that's not going to affect our military readiness in a negative way or affect our people. He'll leave it to members of Congress to decide how they're going to vote on this for themselves. But obviously, he's not going to support amendments. He's not going to support legislation that's going to put our readiness or our troops at any greater risk.
I want to ask you, turning our focus overseas to Ukraine and Russia's war in Ukraine. Just yesterday, the Pentagon spokesperson told reporters that Wagner forces, and the way that he put it was, effectively are no longer contributing as a significant combat capability in Ukraine. What do you make, and what does the White House administration and the president make of the fact that the Prigozhin forces aren't in the fight anymore? Do you assess or think they will return to the fight?
We don't know. We really don't know what the future of Wagner is going to be here, whether it's in Ukraine or anywhere else around the world. We know that they are still conducting malicious activities, particularly in Africa. And just a couple of weeks ago, we launched a few more sanctions on their group and some of their entities and folks that are supporting them. But we don't know what the future of the group is going to be. It's very, very opaque to us right now. What is not opaque, and what we do know, is that the Russians still have a significant amount of forces in Ukraine on defense in depth all along from Bakhmut all the way down to Zaporizhia. And there's some vicious fighting going on. And they are defending themselves against this Ukrainian counteroffensive, which is why we're focused so much on making sure Ukraine has what they need to be successful.
When you, real quick, one other topic that came up when the president was taking questions from reporters overseas yesterday as he was wrapping up his NATO trip and wrapping up his meetings in Finland, the president yesterday called Senator Tommy Tuberville's hold on military promotions. He called him irresponsible. And Tuberville, after that, Tuberville and Secretary Austin did hold a call. Have you all worked this thing out yet?
I don't believe that there's been a solution, no. Obviously it's good that the Secretary of Defense and and Senator Tuberville had a chance to talk yesterday, but his holds are still in place. They're still having an effect on military readiness and, quite frankly, the lives and livelihoods of hundreds of military families here. This blanket hold, it needs to end. It needs to end immediately before
Do you
it
think
has
do you think the
more
president
deleterious
sitting down
effect.
with him could change that?
Now, that's going to be up to Senator Tuberville. And as you heard the president say, if he thought that a meeting between the two of them would break this impasse and could have any useful impact on him dropping his hold, he would consider doing that. But I just don't know that we're at that point right now. And we don't need to be at that point. It shouldn't take a meeting with the President of the United States, and frankly, it shouldn't take a conversation with the Secretary of Defense for the senator to do the right thing for the American people and for the American military. What he's doing now, this hold, is clearly not the right thing for our military readiness.